Before we start the story, drop your city and country in the comments right now. I want to see how far this channel has reached. And if you're someone who believes in doing the right thing even when it costs you everything, this story will break your heart and put it back together. Let's go. Danny Keller's hands wouldn't stop shaking. The security guard's grip on his shoulder felt like iron, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise, hard enough to remind him exactly where he stood in this gleaming tower of glass and money. The lobby stretched out around him like something from another planet. Marble floors so polished he could see his reflection, all distorted and small, wearing his ratty sneakers with the duct tape holding the sole together. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, each one probably worth more than his mom made in a year of double shifts at the hospital. The air conditioning blasted cold enough to raise goosebumps on his arms, and every breath he took smelled like expensive cologne and leather and something else he couldn't name. Something that smelled like power, like places he didn't belong. The executive assistant stood 3 feet away, arms crossed over her designer suit, looking at him the way you'd look at something you scraped off your shoe. Veronica, her name tag said. Her lip curled in disgust as her eyes traveled from his worn-out hoodie with the frayed sleeves down to those taped sneakers, taking inventory of every way he didn't measure up. Danny clutched the wallet tighter in his trembling hands, the leather smooth and expensive against his palms. His fingernails still had dirt under them from sorting recyclables that afternoon, and he tried to hide them, curling his fingers inward. Around them, other employees had started to gather, drawn by the commotion like sharks to blood in the water. Phones came out. People were recording. The fluorescent lights overhead suddenly felt too bright, burning into his skull, and the echo of footsteps on marble sounded like thunder in his ears. I just wanted to return it. That's all. Just wanted to do the right thing. You don't belong here, kid, the security guard said, and his voice carried across the lobby loud enough for everyone to hear. 36 hours earlier, Danny had been walking home from Chen's recycling center, his backpack heavy with the homework he'd do after dinner, his hands raw from sorting glass and metal for 4 hours straight. The storm had passed through that afternoon, vicious and sudden, turning the streets into rivers and leaving garbage scattered across the sidewalks. His shoes squelched with every step, soaked through, and he was thinking about his little brother Ethan wheezing in bed that morning, thinking about the empty inhaler they couldn't afford to refill, thinking about the pile of bills on the kitchen counter stamped with red letters that screamed final notice. He almost walked right past it. Almost. But something made him look down, and there it was, a leather wallet lying in the gutter, rain-soaked and bulging with cash. Danny had stopped walking. His heart hammered against his ribs. The street was empty, no one around to see, no one to know. He'd stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, staring at that wallet, his mind racing through calculations he hated himself for making. That could be rent. That could be medicine. That could be 3 months of not worrying whether the electricity would get shut off. His mom wouldn't have to work 16-hour shifts. Ethan could breathe. But his mother's voice echoed in his head, the same words she'd repeated his entire life. We may be poor, but we're not thieves. Character is doing right when nobody's watching. His hands had been shaking when he picked it up. They were shaking now, too. Back in the lobby, the security guard, Bradley, according to his badge, stood over Danny like a wall of accusation and contempt. A kid like you? Bradley's voice dripped with disbelief. With $1,500? You expect us to believe you found it. He held up the wallet Danny had tried to return, waving it like evidence of a crime. The small crowd of employees pressed closer, a circle of expensive suits and judgmental stares. Someone whispered something Danny couldn't hear, but the laughter that followed cut right through him. His voice cracked when he tried to explain. I did find it. Yesterday after the rain. I just wanted to bring it back. I looked up the address and came straight here after school. Sure you did, Veronica said, her voice sharp as broken glass. We're calling the police. The fluorescent lights were too bright. The crowd was pressing in too close. Danny couldn't breathe. His vision tunneled, black spots dancing at the edges. If they arrested him, if they put him in the system, who would take care of Ethan? Who would walk him to school and make sure he used his inhaler and wake up in the middle of the night to check if he was still breathing? Their mom worked doubles almost every night. She couldn't take time off. They'd already warned her about attendance. One more strike and she'd lose the job. One more strike, and they'd lose everything. Danny's panic must have shown on his face because Bradley's expression hardened, like Danny's fear was proof of guilt. The memory of his mother flashed through his mind, her exhausted smile that morning as she left for another double shift, the way she kissed his forehead and whispered, "I'm so proud of you, baby." He thought of Ethan asking when they'd have enough money for his medicine, his small face trying so hard to be brave. The wallet burned in his hands. He'd memorized every detail of it after he found it, had counted the money 3 times, taking photos with his cracked phone screen to prove he hadn't taken anything. $1,523. He knew the exact amount, had looked at the business card tucked inside. Victor Ashford, CEO, Ashford Enterprises. Had researched the name at the library computer, found out this man was a billionaire, a real estate mogul whose face appeared in newspapers and magazines. And Danny had absolutely known, that if he tried to return this wallet, people would think he stole it. Would think a poor kid from the projects couldn't possibly have honest intentions. "Please," Danny said, his voice breaking. "I just wanted to return it. Check the security cameras from outside. You'll see I just walked in and asked to speak to Mr. Ashford. I didn't do anything wrong." "You probably planted this whole thing," Bradley said. "Probably took the money out already, brought back the wallet to play innocent." "I didn't touch the money." Danny's voice rose, desperate now. "Count it. It's all there. Every dollar. I counted it 3 times. There's $1,523. I memorized it because I knew someone would accuse me of this. I knew it." The elevator at the far end of the lobby chimed. Everyone turned. The polished steel doors slid open, and out stepped a man in an immaculate charcoal suit, phone pressed to his ear, mid-conversation about quarterly projections and market volatility. His silver hair was perfectly styled. His shoes probably cost more than Danny's family's entire monthly budget. He had the kind of presence that made everyone in the lobby stand up straighter, stop talking, pay attention. He was saying something about pushing the Tokyo meeting to next week when his eyes swept across the lobby and landed on the crowd gathered around the security desk. Victor Ashford's eyes moved from the crowd to Danny, taking in the scene with a sharp assessment of someone who'd built an empire by reading people and situations in seconds. His gaze locked onto Danny's face, then dropped to the wallet in the boy's trembling hands. Danny's desperation exploded out of him. "Mr. Ashford? I found your wallet. I just wanted to return it. Please, I swear I didn't steal it. I found it in the gutter after the storm yesterday, and I counted the money, and it's all there, and I just wanted to do the right thing." Victor Ashford's expression was unreadable. Stone. A mask that revealed nothing. Bradley jumped in, his voice oozing false deference. "Sir, we caught this street kid trying to—" Victor raised one hand. Just one hand, barely a movement, but the entire lobby fell silent like someone had cut the sound. His eyes never left Danny's face. "Wait," Victor said. "If you've ever been judged by your appearance, if you've ever tried to do the right thing and been punished for it, hit that subscribe button right now, because Olivia the Storyteller brings you stories that matter. And to everyone who's scrolling without subscribing, go ahead and comment below telling me why Danny's struggle doesn't move you enough to click one button. I'll wait." 48 hours before Danny stood trembling in that marble lobby with security's hand crushing his shoulder, he'd been in a completely different kind of struggle. The kind that happened every single morning in a 4th-floor walk-up where the paint peeled off the walls in long strips like dead skin, and the radiator clanked and hissed like it was angry about having to work at all. 6:15 in the morning, and Danny's alarm hadn't even gone off yet when he woke up to check on his little brother. Ethan was 7 years old and slept in the twin bed, pushed against the opposite wall of their shared bedroom, his breathing rough and labored even in sleep. Danny had learned to wake up to that sound, that wet rattling that meant Ethan's lungs were struggling again. He slipped out of bed, his feet hitting the cold floor, and walked over to gently shake Ethan's shoulder. His brother's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and tired. Danny helped him sit up, rubbing his back while Ethan coughed, and then headed to the kitchen to start breakfast. Their apartment was small enough that you could see everything from everywhere. The kitchen was just a corner of the living room, really, with a 2-burner stove that only one burner worked on, and a refrigerator that hummed too loud and smelled faintly of something gone bad, no matter how many times they cleaned it. The morning light coming through the window was gray and weak, barely touching the stack of bills on the counter. Danny didn't need to look at them to know what they said. Final notice stamped across 3 of them in red ink that looked like blood. Their mom had already left for her shift. Linda worked as a nurse at County General, and the 6 a.m. shifts paid slightly more, which meant she took as many as they'd give her. Danny found her note stuck to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a sunflower that had been there since before his dad left. Love you boys. Leftover pasta in fridge. Be good. Her handwriting was messy, rushed, the writing of someone who was already exhausted before the day even started. Danny opened the fridge. 2 eggs left in the carton. Half a loaf of bread that had gone stale 3 days ago. The pasta she'd mentioned. Maybe enough for dinner if he split it with Ethan. He cracked both eggs into the pan, toasted the stale bread, and divided everything onto 2 plates. Ethan's portion slightly bigger than his own, even though his stomach was growling. While the bread toasted, Danny grabbed the jar they kept on top of the fridge, the one where they collected loose change. He unscrewed the lid and dumped the contents onto the counter, counting slowly. Quarters, dimes, nickels, pennies. $47.23. He'd counted it last night, too, hoping somehow the number would have changed. It hadn't. Ethan's inhaler refill cost $65 without insurance, and they'd lost the insurance 2 months ago when Linda's hours got cut. The electric company wanted $80, or they'd shut off the power on Friday. Danny had been doing the math for weeks now, trying to figure out how to make the numbers work. They never did. Ethan shuffled into the kitchen, dragging his worn stuffed bear that used to be brown but had faded to a grayish tan. He climbed onto the chair and started eating his eggs without complaint, even though Danny knew he was still tired, still struggling to breathe properly. "My chest hurts, Danny," Ethan said quietly, like he was afraid of being a burden. Danny's heart clenched. He went to the bathroom and checked the medicine cabinet, even though he already knew what he'd find. The inhaler was there, plastic and blue and completely empty. He tried shaking it yesterday, hoping for one more dose. Nothing. Danny made a decision. He had to go to school. They'd already sent a truancy warning home, and if he missed more days, they'd send someone to investigate, and that meant questions about why Mom was never home and whether the boys were being properly cared for. He couldn't risk it, but right after school, he'd go straight to Chen's recycling center. No homework break. No rest. Just work. He grabbed both their backpacks, helped Ethan into his jacket that was 2 sizes too small, and took his little brother's hand. Ethan's palm was small and warm in his, and they walked down the 4 flights of stairs together, careful on the steps where the linoleum had cracked and come loose. Outside, the morning air was cold enough to burn Danny's lungs, and the bus exhaust from the stop on the corner made Ethan cough again. Danny squeezed his hand tighter and whispered that everything would be okay, even though he wasn't sure he believed it anymore. At school, Danny's teacher, Ms. Ramsey, found him with his head on his desk during 3rd period, not quite asleep, but not quite awake either. She'd been kind to him all year, this young teacher with tired eyes who seemed to understand more than she said. "Danny, are you okay?" she asked, and he jerked upright, mumbling something about staying up late reading a book for fun. She looked at him like she knew he was lying but didn't push it. The truth was he'd worked until midnight at the recycling center the night before, sorting through bins of glass and metal and plastic in the fluorescent lights of Chen's warehouse, trying to hit his quota so Chen would pay him a little extra. Around him, his classmates pulled out phones that cost more than his mom made in a month. Their backpacks were new, branded, covered in pins and patches from places they traveled. Danny's backpack was held together with duct tape and had been donated from the church charity bin 3 years ago. At lunch, he sat with Marcus, a kid from his math class, and halfway through his sandwich, peanut butter on that stale bread, no jelly. Marcus mentioned he'd forgotten his lunch money and his mom couldn't bring him anything. Danny didn't hesitate. He tore his sandwich in half and handed Marcus the bigger piece. Marcus tried to refuse, but Danny insisted. It was what he did, what he'd always done. Even when he had nothing, he found something to give. After school, Danny walked straight to Chen's recycling center on the industrial side of town where the buildings were all corrugated metal and chain-link fence. Mr. Chen paid him $8 an hour under the table, no paperwork, no questions, just cash at the end of each shift. Danny had a goal, $200 by Friday. The inhaler and the electric bill. That's what he needed. Right now he had $140 saved, which meant he needed $60 more. 7.5 more hours of work. He could do 3 hours today, 3 hours tomorrow, and squeeze in more on Thursday. It would work. It had to work. The work was brutal. Sorting glass meant cuts on his hands, even through the gloves. The metal had sharp edges. The plastic left his fingers stained with residue that wouldn't wash off completely. The other workers were all adults, men and women who'd lived harder lives than Danny could imagine, and they looked at him with pity that made him stand up straighter and work faster. "I'm helping my family," he'd tell them when they asked why a kid his age was working there. And he was. Every dollar mattered. By the time his shift ended, the sun was setting and Danny's whole body ached. He took his usual shortcut home through the nicer neighborhood, the one where the buildings had doormen and the windows glowed warm with light. He couldn't help but look inside as he passed, seeing families sitting around dinner tables together, laughing, talking about their days. Parents who were home. Food that wasn't rationed. Kids who didn't have to count change in jars. Danny wondered what that felt like, to not worry about every single thing all the time. And then the sky opened up. The storm hit fast and vicious, rain pouring down in sheets, and Danny ran for cover, his backpack held over his head. Tomorrow, soaked and shivering, he'd find that wallet. Tomorrow, everything would change. If Danny's life reminds you of someone you know, or maybe even yourself, subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller because these are the stories that show real resilience. And if you're watching without subscribing, comment below and tell me what it would take for you to finally support this channel. Do you need Danny to suffer more? Let me know. The next day after school, the storm had passed but left its mark everywhere. The streets were covered in puddles that reflected the gray sky, and garbage was scattered across the sidewalks like confetti after a party nobody wanted to attend. Danny walked slowly, his backpack weighing heavy on his shoulders, his body still aching from yesterday's shift at the recycling center. His hands were raw, bandaged in a few places where the glass had cut through his gloves, and every step felt like he was dragging himself through mud. He was thinking about numbers again, always numbers. $60 more. 7 more hours of work. Friday's deadline for the electric bill. The pharmacy's price for Ethan's inhaler. The math never added up, no matter how many times he rearranged it in his head. He almost didn't see it. Would have walked right past if a shoe hadn't splashed through a puddle and sent water spraying onto something that didn't belong. There, half submerged in the gutter next to a storm drain, was a wallet. Not just any wallet. This was leather, real leather, the kind that was smooth and expensive and looked like it cost more than Danny's entire wardrobe. It was dark brown, almost black, and completely out of place in this neighborhood where most people carried their money in Ziploc bags or rubber-banded stacks. Danny stopped walking. His heart started beating faster. He looked around, both directions down the street, checking to see if anyone was nearby, if anyone had dropped it and was coming back. The street was empty, completely empty. Just him and the puddles and the scattered trash and this wallet that seemed to glow in the fading afternoon light. He bent down and picked it up. It was heavy, heavier than any wallet should be. His hands trembled as he held it, and for a moment he just stood there on that empty street, feeling the weight of it, knowing that whatever was inside was about to change something. He didn't know what yet, but he could feel it in his bones. Danny opened the wallet slowly, carefully, like it might explode. Inside was a thick stack of $100 bills, crisp and clean, more money than Danny had ever seen in one place in his entire life. There were business cards tucked into slots, credit cards that looked heavy and metallic, and an ID card with a photo. Victor Ashford. The name hit Danny like a punch to the stomach because he knew that name. Everyone knew that name. Victor Ashford was a billionaire. The kind of billionaire who appeared in newspapers and on the news, who owned half the buildings downtown, who invested in tech companies and real estate, and showed up at charity galas in tuxedos. Danny had seen his face before, that silver hair and sharp eyes, usually standing next to politicians or celebrities. And now Danny was holding his wallet, counting his money with shaking hands. $1,500 bills, 2 tens, 3 ones, $1,523. There was also a photo tucked behind the ID card, an old woman with kind eyes, maybe Ashford's mother. Danny's brain started calculating automatically, the same way it always did. This money equaled 3 months of bills paid in full. This money could buy Ethan's inhaler and enough refills to last the entire year. This money meant his mom could cut back from doubles to single shifts, could actually see them in the evenings, could stop looking so exhausted all the time that her eyes had permanent shadows underneath. Danny stood on that empty street with $1,523 in his hands and felt something break inside his chest. It would be so easy, so incredibly easy. He could take the money out, throw the wallet away, and no one would ever know. No one would connect a poor kid from the projects to a billionaire's lost wallet. He could say he found the money, that someone dropped it, that it was a miracle. His mom would believe him because she trusted him. And they needed it. God, they needed it so badly. Ethan had wheezed all night last night, that wet rattling sound that made Danny lie awake counting his brother's breaths, terrified one would be the last. The electric company had called twice yesterday. Their landlord had left another note about late rent. They were drowning, and here was a life raft made of $100 bills. But then his mother's voice filled his head, clear as if she was standing right next to him. We may be poor, but we're not thieves. She'd said that to him 100 times, 1,000 times, every time he came home frustrated about what they didn't have, what they couldn't afford. Character is doing right when nobody's watching, baby. That's what separates us from people who've lost themselves. Danny remembered last year when he'd found a $20 bill on the floor at the grocery store and turned it into the cashier. The woman had been so shocked she'd given him $5 as a reward, and Danny had taken Ethan to get ice cream. The look on his brother's face, that pure joy over a simple ice cream cone, had felt better than any amount of money. This was different, though. This wasn't $20. This was survival. This was medicine and electricity and food and maybe, just maybe, a chance to breathe without the constant weight of panic crushing his chest. Danny's hands were shaking, so badly, he almost dropped the wallet. Tears formed in his eyes, hot and angry and desperate. What would his mom think if he took it? What would Ethan think when he grew up and found out his brother was a thief? What would Danny think every time he looked in the mirror? The internal battle raged inside him, need versus integrity, survival versus character, and it felt like being torn in half. He stood there on that empty street for 5 full minutes, maybe longer, the wallet burning in his hands like it was on fire. And then he made his decision. He had to return it. He had to. There was no other choice, not really, not if he wanted to stay himself. Not if he wanted to look his mom and his brother in the eyes and know he was worthy of their love. Danny closed the wallet, tucked it carefully into his backpack, and started walking toward the public library 3 blocks away. He needed to research Victor Ashford, find out where his office was, figure out how to return this wallet without getting accused of stealing it. Because he already knew how this would look, a poor kid from the projects with a billionaire's wallet full of cash. They'd call the police. They'd assume the worst. He needed to be smart about this. At the library, Danny used the computer to search Victor Ashford's name. The headquarters of Ashford Enterprises was downtown, a 40-minute bus ride from Danny's neighborhood. A gleaming tower of glass and steel that looked like something from another planet. Danny memorized the address, studied the building's photo on the website, and made his plan. Tomorrow after school, he'd go there. He'd hand over the wallet, explain that he found it, and then leave. Simple. Quick. No reward expected, no recognition wanted. Just the right thing done. That night, Danny couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Ethan wheezed softly across the room, and he kept thinking about that money, kept calculating what it could do for them. He got up twice to count it again, just to make sure he hadn't imagined the amount. $1,523. Every time, the same number. He took photos of it with his cracked phone screen, evidence that he hadn't stolen anything, that it had all been there when he found it. He even wrote down the serial numbers of some of the bills in his notebook, obsessive and terrified of being accused. Because in his world, in his neighborhood, in his life, poor kids didn't get the benefit of the doubt. Poor kids were guilty until proven innocent, and sometimes not even then. The morning he planned to return the wallet, Danny told his mom he had something important to do after school. Linda was distracted, moving around the kitchen in her scrubs, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her face already showing the exhaustion of another double shift ahead. She got news yesterday that the hospital was cutting more nursing positions, and she was terrified of being next. "That's fine, baby," she said without really listening. "Just be home before dark." Danny almost told her about the wallet, almost explained what he was about to do, but something stopped him. He wanted to surprise her, wanted to come home and tell her that he'd done the right thing, that he'd proven her lessons about character weren't just words, that even when they were desperate, even when they were drowning, they kept their integrity. Ethan caught him by the door as he was leaving. "Where are you going?" his little brother asked, those wide eyes curious and trusting. Danny knelt down to his level, adjusting Ethan's jacket. "I'm going to return something that doesn't belong to me," he said simply. Ethan nodded like that made perfect sense, like of course that's what you did when you found something that wasn't yours. Danny hugged him tight, breathing in his little brother's scent of kid shampoo and morning toast, and then headed out. The wallet was in his backpack, heavy with cash and consequence. And Danny walked toward that downtown bus stop with his head held high, terrified and determined in equal measure, ready to do the hardest right thing he'd ever done in his 12 years of life. Danny chose integrity over survival. If that doesn't deserve a subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller, I don't know what does. And for those of you still watching without subscribing, comment below and explain what's stopping you. Is it really that hard to support someone sharing stories about real values? Danny got off the bus 3 blocks from Ashford Tower because that was as close as the route came to this part of downtown, where the buildings scraped the sky and the people moved like they owned the air they breathed. He walked those 3 blocks with his backpack clutched tight to his chest, the wallet inside feeling heavier with every step. The tower rose in front of him like a mountain made of glass and steel, 60 stories of gleaming windows that reflected the afternoon sun, so brightly it hurt to look at directly. It was the kind of building that didn't just house offices. It announced power, declared dominance, reminded everyone who passed by exactly where they stood in the hierarchy of the world. And Danny stood at the bottom, looking up. People in expensive suits rushed past him on the sidewalk, talking on phones, checking watches that probably cost more than Danny's mom made in 6 months. Nobody looked at him. Or rather, they looked through him, like he was invisible, like poor kids from the projects didn't exist in this part of the city. Danny's worn sneakers with the duct tape holding the sole looked even worse against the pristine concrete. His patched jacket, the one his mom had sewn 3 times to extend its life, suddenly felt like a spotlight pointing out everything he wasn't. He was self-conscious in a way he'd never been before, aware of every thread coming loose, every stain that wouldn't wash out, every marker of poverty that labeled him as other. But he was determined. He'd come this far. He'd made the decision to do the right thing, and he wasn't backing down now. The entrance to Ashford Tower had revolving doors made of brass and glass, polished so perfectly they looked like mirrors. A doorman stood outside in a uniform that looked more expensive than anything Danny owned, complete with white gloves and a cap with a gold emblem. Danny approached slowly, and the doorman's eyes tracked him from a distance, assessing, judging, concluding. When Danny got close enough to speak, the doorman stepped slightly to the side, not blocking the entrance but definitely positioning himself as a barrier. "Can I help you?" The words were polite, but the tone underneath them was clear as day. "You don't belong here. What are you doing in this part of town? This isn't for people like you." Danny swallowed hard and tried to keep his voice steady. "I need to see Mr. Ashford. Victor Ashford. I found his wallet and I'm returning it." The doorman's expression shifted to something between skepticism and amusement. "Sure you did, kid." He said it like Danny had just told him he'd found a unicorn or discovered buried treasure. Like the very idea of a boy who looked like Danny doing something honest was a joke. Danny felt his face flush with embarrassment and anger, but he forced himself to stay calm. He pulled the wallet carefully from his backpack and held it up to the glass, showing it to the doorman. The man's expression changed immediately. His eyes widened slightly, and he leaned forward to get a better look. He recognized it. Of course he did. He'd probably seen Victor Ashford carry that wallet 1,000 times. The doorman's attitude shifted, but not in the way Danny had hoped. Instead of respect or gratitude, there was suspicion, heavy and thick. "Wait here," he said, pulling out a phone and speaking quietly into it. Then he opened the door, not the revolving one but a side door, and gestured for Danny to enter. "Security will handle this." The words landed like a threat. Danny stepped inside and immediately felt like he'd entered another universe. The lobby was all marble, floors, walls, even the massive columns that stretched up to a ceiling 3 stories high. There were water features with fountains that created a constant gentle rushing sound, and modern art hung on the walls, abstract pieces that probably cost more than Danny's entire apartment building. The air smelled like money, if money had a smell, clean and cold and expensive, like high-end cologne mixed with leather and something floral he couldn't identify. Employees walked through the lobby in groups, their shoes clicking on the marble, their voices low and professional. And every single one of them stopped to stare at Danny. He could feel their eyes on him, could see them whispering to each other, could read the disgust on their faces as clearly as if they'd spoken it out loud. He didn't belong here. His worn-out clothes, his scuffed shoes, his messy hair that he tried to comb down that morning but never quite stayed flat. Everything about him screamed wrong place, wrong class, wrong world. Danny's internal voice was screaming at him. You don't belong here. But a stronger voice underneath reminded him why he'd come. I'm doing the right thing. That's all that matters. The security desk sat in the center of the lobby like a command center, all dark wood and multiple computer screens. Behind it sat a man whose name tag read Bradley Sutton, and everything about him communicated authority and suspicion in equal measure. He was in his mid-40s, built thick and solid like someone who'd spent years in law enforcement, which Danny would learn later was exactly what he'd been before taking this corporate security job. Bradley had the hardened expression of someone who'd seen too much, trusted too little, and had decided somewhere along the way that the world was full of people trying to get away with something. And right now, he was looking at Danny like he just caught him red-handed. Where'd you steal that? Bradley's first words weren't even a question. They were an accusation, flat and certain. Danny felt his stomach drop. I didn't steal it. I found it yesterday after the rain. It was in the gutter near 42nd Street. I looked at the ID and came straight here to return it. His voice sounded small in that massive lobby, and he hated how it cracked with nervousness. Bradley leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, that skeptical expression deepening. Uh-huh. And you expect a reward, is that it? Found a billionaire's wallet and thought you'd cash in on being honest. Danny felt something crack inside him. No, sir. I don't want anything. I just want to return it. It's not mine. It doesn't belong to me. Bradley reached out and took the wallet from Danny's trembling hands, examining it with the careful attention of someone looking for evidence. He opened it, counted the money slowly, checked the cards, looked through every pocket. Danny watched him, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Everything was there. Every single dollar. Every card. The photo. Everything. And somehow, that seemed to make Bradley even more suspicious. His eyes narrowed as he looked from the wallet back to Danny. What's your angle, kid? Nobody returns $1,500 without wanting something. That's when she appeared. Veronica Marsh, the executive assistant whose job apparently included handling problems before they reached Victor Ashford's desk. She walked across the marble floor like she was on a runway, her heels clicking sharp and precise, her designer suit perfectly tailored, her hair and makeup flawless in that way that took both time and money. She'd been called down to verify the wallet, to confirm it was actually Victor's property, but the moment her eyes landed on Danny, her expression turned ice cold. She looked at him the way you'd look at something stuck to your shoe, an assessment that took 3 seconds, and concluded he was guilty of something, even if she didn't know what yet. This is Mr. Ashford's property. How did you get it? Danny explained again, the words tumbling out faster now, more desperate. He told her about finding it after the storm, about checking the contents to make sure everything was there, about coming straight here because it was the right thing to do. Veronica listened with an expression that suggested she didn't believe a single word. She turned to Bradley. Search his bag. Danny's eyes went wide. What? No. I didn't do anything wrong. You can't just... But Bradley was already reaching for his backpack, and Danny was 12 years old in a building full of adults who'd already decided he was lying. They found his work gloves from the recycling center, stained and worn. They found his homework, crumpled and covered in his messy handwriting. They found his empty lunch bag. Nothing suspicious. Nothing that proved anything except that he was exactly who he said he was, a working kid trying to survive. Veronica examined the contents of his backpack like they were evidence at a crime scene. This doesn't prove anything, she said, her voice cold. She was creating a narrative in real time, deciding that Danny was either a con artist or a thief, that there had to be some angle, some scam, because boys like him didn't just return money. The situation was escalating out of control. Other employees had started gathering around, drawn by the commotion, their phones coming out to record. Danny could see himself through their eyes. Poor, desperate, probably guilty of something. The anxiety was crushing his chest, making it hard to breathe, and he could feel tears forming in his eyes, no matter how hard he tried to stop them. "Please," Danny said, his voice breaking completely now. "Just call Mr. Ashford. Let me explain to him what happened. I'm not lying. I'm not trying to steal anything. I just wanted to do the right thing." Veronica's expression didn't soften even slightly. "Mr. Ashford doesn't have time for street children." The words hit Danny like a slap. Street children. Like he was nobody. Like he didn't matter. Like his honesty and his struggle and his choice meant nothing because he was poor. Bradley's hand came down on Danny's shoulder, gripping too tight, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "We're calling the police. Let them sort this out." Danny's world collapsed. Police meant arrest. Arrest meant a juvenile record. A record meant no future, no opportunities, no way to help his family. Who would take care of Ethan if Danny got taken away? Who would make sure his little brother got his medicine, got to school, stayed safe? His mom was barely holding on as it was. This would destroy them. The tears came now, hot and unstoppable, rolling down Danny's cheeks while strangers filmed him and whispered and judged. He couldn't breathe. The crowd was pressing in too close. The fluorescent lights were too bright. The air conditioning was too cold. Everything was too much. And then the elevator chimed. That bright, clear sound cut through the noise of the lobby, and every single person turned to look. The polished steel doors slid open, and out stepped Victor Ashford himself, phone pressed to his ear, mid-conversation about quarterly projections and market volatility. He was everything Danny had seen in the photos. Silver hair perfectly styled, expensive charcoal suit that probably cost thousands, shoes polished to a mirror shine, the kind of presence that made everyone stand straighter. He was talking about pushing a Tokyo meeting to next week when his eyes swept across the lobby and landed on the crowd gathered around the security desk. His gaze moved from the crowd to Danny, taking in the scene with the sharp assessment of someone who'd built an empire by reading situations in seconds. Danny's desperation exploded out of him. "Mr. Ashford? I found your wallet. I just wanted to return it. Please, I swear I didn't steal it. I found it in the gutter after the storm yesterday, and I counted the money, and it's all there, and I just wanted to do the right thing." His voice was cracking, tears streaming down his face, the words tumbling over each other in his panic. Victor Ashford's expression was unreadable, a mask that revealed nothing. Bradley jumped in, his voice oozing false deference. "Sir, we caught the street kid trying to—" But Victor raised one hand. Just one hand, barely a movement, but the entire lobby fell silent like someone had cut the sound. His eyes never left Danny's face. "Wait," Victor said. Danny walked into that building with pure intentions and was treated like a criminal. If you've ever been underestimated, judged, or dismissed, subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller right now. And to everyone watching without subscribing, go ahead and comment explaining why Danny's pain isn't enough to earn your support. I'm genuinely curious. That single word from Victor Ashford, "wait," carried more authority than anything Danny had ever heard in his life. The lobby didn't just go quiet. It went silent in a way that felt physical, like the air itself had stopped moving. Victor's presence commanded the space without him having to raise his voice or make threats or do anything except exist with that calm, unshakable certainty that came from decades of making decisions that affected thousands of lives. His eyes moved from the wallet in Bradley's hands to Danny's tear-streaked face to the security guard's grip on the boy's shoulder to the crowd of employees standing around with their phones out like they were watching entertainment. He assessed the entire situation in maybe 5 seconds, and Danny could see the calculations happening behind those sharp eyes, the same kind of rapid analysis that had probably built a billion-dollar empire. Everyone back to work. Now. Victor's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the space like a blade. The crowd dispersed immediately, reluctantly, people pocketing their phones and walking away with backward glances, clearly disappointed that the show was ending. Victor turned to Bradley, and his tone dropped a few degrees colder. "Release the boy." Bradley's hand came off Danny's shoulder, so fast you'd think it had burned him. Then Victor looked at Veronica, who was standing there with that ice-cold expression still frozen on her face. Conference room. The boy comes too. He said it like it wasn't a request, like there was no possibility of disagreement, and then he turned and started walking toward the elevators without checking to see if they were following. Danny stood there for a second, confused and scared and desperately hopeful all at once, not sure what was happening but knowing that whatever came next would determine everything. They rode the elevator in silence to the 47th floor, and when the doors opened, they stepped into a different world. The executive floor was all glass and chrome and quiet luxury, the kind of space where even the air felt expensive. Victor led them to a conference room that had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city, and Danny could see for miles, buildings and streets and parks spreading out below like a map of a life he'd never get to live. Victor sat at the head of the massive table, gesturing for Danny to take a chair. Danny perched on the edge of it nervously, his feet barely touching the floor, his hands clasped in his lap to hide the trembling. Veronica stood by the door like a sentinel, her expression suggesting she still thought this was all a waste of time. Victor took the wallet from where Bradley had set it on the table and examined it thoroughly, opening every compartment, counting the money slowly and deliberately, checking the cards. Danny watched him, barely breathing. Finally, Victor looked up, and his eyes locked onto Danny's. Everything's here. Every dollar. It wasn't a question, but Danny nodded anyway. Victor leaned back in his chair, still studying the boy with that intense focus. Why? The question hung in the air between them. Danny's voice shook when he answered. Because it's yours. It sounded so simple when he said it out loud, but Victor's expression suggested it wasn't simple at all. Many people would have kept it. Most people, probably. Danny swallowed hard. My mom says character is doing right when nobody's watching. But you're watching now, so... He trailed off, not sure how to finish that thought. For the first time, Victor's stern expression cracked just slightly, the corner of his mouth turning up in what might have been the beginning of a smile. Where did you find it? Danny explained about walking home after his shift at the recycling center, about the storm and the puddles, and seeing the wallet in the gutter near 42nd Street. Victor nodded slowly. That's where I lost it. I was meeting with the city council about a development project. Must have fallen out during the rain. He paused, his fingers drumming once on the table. You could have taken the money out, thrown the wallet away. No one would have known. Danny felt his throat tighten. I would know. My brother would know. That matters more than the money. Victor studied him for a long moment, and Danny felt like he was being examined under a microscope, every part of him analyzed and assessed. Then Victor asked a question Danny hadn't expected. What would you have done with $1,500? Danny hesitated, because the truth felt like it might sound like he was asking for something, but lying felt impossible in that moment. My brother needs medicine. His inhaler. The pharmacy charges $65, and we don't have insurance anymore. And our electricity might get shut off on Friday if we don't pay $80. He explained quickly about his mom's nursing job at County General, about his work at Chen's recycling center, about trying to make the numbers add up when they never did. But he was careful not to ask for anything, just stated the facts like they were weather conditions. Unfortunate but unchangeable. But it's not mine. It wouldn't feel right keeping it, even if we need it so badly I can barely breathe sometimes thinking about it. Victor sat in silence, processing what Danny had said. The silence stretched out until it felt uncomfortable, and Danny started to wonder if he'd said too much, revealed too much, made himself look desperate or pathetic. Veronica interrupted from her position by the door. Sir, your 4 o'clock is waiting. Victor waved her off without even looking at her, his attention still completely focused on Danny. You came all this way, took a 40-minute bus ride, missed your shift at work, just to return my wallet. Danny nodded. Victor's expression was unreadable again. You understand most people would think you're foolish? That you gave up money you desperately need for what? Principle. Danny straightened in his chair, something shifting inside him. He was 12 years old, sitting across from a billionaire in a conference room that probably cost more to furnish than his entire apartment building, but in that moment he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Maybe they would think I'm foolish, but I can look at myself in the mirror. Can they? The words came out stronger than he expected, Not defined exactly, but certain. True. Victor's expression changed completely. The assessment in his eyes shifted to something else. Respect, recognition, maybe even a little bit of surprise. He stood up, and Danny scrambled to his feet too. Victor extended his hand across the table. Thank you, Danny. Truly. Danny shook his hand, gripping as firmly as he could even though his hand was trembling and small in Victor's larger one. Victor pulled out his wallet, the very wallet Danny had returned, and took out $200 bills. Reward for your honesty. Danny's eyes went wide. I didn't do it for money. I don't want a reward. Victor's slight smile returned. I know. That's exactly why you're getting it. He pressed the bills into Danny's hand, and Danny felt tears threatening again, but different tears this time. Victor walked toward the door, and Danny thought that was it, that the moment was over, that he'd go back to his life, and this would just be a story he'd tell. But Victor paused at the door and turned back. How old are you? And what else are you late for? Danny proved that integrity exists even when you're desperate. If you believe the world needs more people like him, subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller. And to those still not subscribing, comment below telling me what would finally make you click that button. Does Danny need to do something superhuman? Tell me your standards. Danny was clutching those $200 bills in his hand, still trying to process what had just happened, when Victor asked him that question about what he was late for. Danny's face flushed with embarrassment. My shift at the recycling center. I was supposed to be there an hour ago. Mr. Chun is probably wondering where I am. Victor stopped walking and turned around slowly, his expression shifting into something Danny couldn't quite read. You work? At 12 years old. There was no judgment in the question, just something else. Surprise maybe, or recognition, or something deeper that Danny didn't have words for yet. Danny nodded, explaining quickly about his after-school job sorting materials at Chen's recycling center, about the $8 an hour he made under the table, about trying to save enough for Ethan's medicine and the electric bill. Victor's expression shifted completely. Something flickered across his face, a memory, maybe, or a ghost of something he buried a long time ago. He was quiet for a moment, just looking at Danny like he was seeing something beyond the 12-year-old boy standing in front of him. Then he made a decision. Come with me. One more stop before you go. He led Danny back to the elevator, but this time they went down instead of up, down to the parking garage underneath the building where luxury cars sat in assigned spaces like expensive jewelry in display cases. A black sedan was waiting, sleek and polished, with a driver in a suit standing beside it. Danny's eyes went wide. I should take the bus. I've already taken up so much of your time. Victor opened the car door. Get in. I want to show you something. They drove through the city in silence for the first few minutes. Danny pressed against the leather seat that was softer than any furniture in his apartment, watching the buildings pass by through tinted windows. Then Victor started talking, and his voice had changed. It was quieter now, more distant, like he was speaking to someone who wasn't in the car with them. I was 13 when I started working. Danny turned to look at him, surprised. Victor stared straight ahead. My father died when I was 12. Heart attack. Left my mother with 4 kids and medical debt that would take a lifetime to pay. My mother got sick 6 months later. Cancer. So it was me and 3 younger siblings. Danny listened, barely breathing, because this wasn't the story of a billionaire. This was something else entirely. I shined shoes, Victor continued, and his voice had an edge to it now, something sharp and old. Right outside this very building, actually. Before I owned it, I charged $1 per shine, and I worked from 6 in the morning until the sun went down. Rich people would walk past me every single day. Most of them ignored me completely. Some stepped over me like I was part of a sidewalk. A few would drop change in my box without even looking at my face. Danny felt something break open in his chest. Victor turned to look at him. I promised myself something during those years on that sidewalk. I promised that if I ever made it, if I ever climbed out of that hole, I would remember where I came from. I would remember what it felt like to be invisible. The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. You remind me of myself, Danny. That same determination. That same refusal to give up even when the world tells you you're not worth anything. The car stopped outside a large building that looked newer than the others on the block, with big windows, and a sign that read Ashford Community Foundation. Victor got out and Danny followed, his mind still reeling from what he'd just heard. "I built this 10 years ago," Victor said, gesturing to the building. "For kids like I was. For kids like you are now." Inside was a world Danny had never imagined existed. There were rooms full of computers where kids were doing homework with tutors, a gym where teenagers were playing basketball, an art studio with paintings covering the walls, a music room where someone was practicing piano, a library with more books than Danny had ever seen in one place. And it was all free. Every single bit of it. Free for any child who needed it. The director of the center came over, a warm woman with kind eyes who greeted Victor like an old friend. Victor introduced Danny with words that made the boy's chest tighten. "This young man has exceptional character. I want him enrolled in everything we offer." He turned to Danny. "Tutoring in whatever subjects you need. SAT prep when you're ready. College counseling. All of it, completely free." Then he added something that made Danny's knees feel weak. "We also have a youth mentorship program. It includes paid positions helping with the younger kids. $15 an hour. Flexible scheduling around school." Danny just stood there, his mouth open, unable to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to kids from the projects. "Why are you doing this?" Danny's voice came out as barely a whisper, and tears were forming in his eyes again. Victor looked at him with an expression that was both sad and determined. "Because someone should have done it for me. And because you earned it." Danny started to protest, to say he didn't earn anything, but Victor held up a hand. "Not by returning my wallet, though that matters. By being willing to sacrifice when you had every excuse not to. By choosing character over survival. That's rare, Danny. Rarer than you know." Victor introduced him to the youth coordinator, a young man named Marcus who'd been through the program himself and now ran it. They set up an intake appointment for the following week. Danny couldn't speak. He literally couldn't form words. Finally, he managed. "I don't know what to say." Victor's response was simple and direct. "Say you'll take advantage of it. Say you'll make something of yourself." On the drive back to Danny's neighborhood, Victor asked about Ethan's medicine. Danny explained about the asthma, the empty inhaler, the $65 they didn't have. Victor pulled out his phone and made a call right there in the car, his voice calm and businesslike. "This is Victor Ashford. I need to set up an account for Linda Keller. Her son, Ethan, needs regular medications for asthma. Bill me directly for all prescriptions." He gave Danny's address, confirmed the details, and hung up. Danny was crying now, really crying, his whole body shaking with sobs he couldn't control. "Why?" he asked again. "Why are you doing all this?" Victor looked at him, and his expression was softer than it had been all afternoon. "Because I can. And because you showed me that people like you still exist. People who do the right thing even when it costs them everything." They pulled up outside Danny's apartment building, and Victor walked him to the door. Before he left, he put a hand on Danny's shoulder, gentle this time, nothing like Bradley's crushing grip. "I'm watching your future, Danny. Don't disappoint me." Danny nodded, still unable to fully speak. Victor started to walk away, then turned back one more time. "And Danny, same time next week. You're working for me now." Victor saw potential where everyone else saw a poor kid. If this story is touching your heart, subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller because we share stories that restore faith in humanity. And if you're still not subscribed, comment below explaining what's missing from this story that would make you finally support this channel. What more do you need? Danny burst through the apartment door that evening with tears still wet on his cheeks and $200 clutched in his hand and a story that sounded too impossible to be true. His mother was at the kitchen table, still in her scrubs from the hospital, eating cold leftover pasta straight from the container because she was too tired to heat it up. She looked up when Danny came in, and the expression on his face made her drop her fork. He told her everything, every single detail, from finding the wallet to the decision to return it to the humiliation in the lobby to Victor Ashford's unexpected kindness. Linda listened without interrupting, her eyes getting wider and wetter with every word, and when Danny finished, she pulled him into her arms and sobbed. "You could have kept that money," she said into his hair. "We needed it so badly. We still need it." Danny pulled back to look at her. "That's exactly why I couldn't. You taught me that. You taught me we may be poor, but we're not thieves." Linda was overwhelmed in a way Danny had never seen her, crying and laughing at the same time, holding his face in her hands like she needed to make sure he was real. And then the pharmacy called. A professional voice on the other end explaining that an account had been set up in their name, that Ethan's medications were ready for pickup, that all future prescriptions would be covered. Linda had to sit down. That night, for the first time in months, Ethan breathed easily. Danny lay in bed listening to his little brother's steady, clear breathing instead of that terrible wheezing, and he felt something shift inside himself. His mother came into their room and sat on the edge of his bed. "You saved us, baby," she whispered. "Your choice saved us." Danny's pride wasn't about the reward money or the job offer or any of the external things. It was about knowing he'd done the right thing and somehow, impossibly, it had worked out. A week later, Danny walked through the doors of the Ashford Community Foundation for his first real day, and it felt like stepping into a different version of his life. His new job was helping with youth activities and tutoring younger kids in subjects he was good at, which turned out to be math and reading. $15 an hour, 3 days a week after school, with a flexible schedule that let him keep up with his homework. He was also enrolled in the SAT prep course, even though he was only 12, because Victor had said it was never too early to start thinking about college. Danny met other kids with backgrounds like his, kids who understood what it meant to count coins in jars and ration food and worry about electricity getting shut off. He finally belonged somewhere. There was a girl named Maria who became his friend almost immediately, and one day she told him something that made his chest tight. "Victor helped my family too. Paid for my dad's surgery 2 years ago. He's like a quiet superhero. He does this stuff all the time and never tells anyone." Danny started learning that Victor Ashford helped dozens of families throughout the city, setting up accounts and paying bills and creating opportunities, all without any publicity or recognition. He never wanted his name on anything, never wanted credit, just did it because he could and because he remembered what it felt like to be powerless. But not everyone saw it that way. Bradley and Veronica hadn't forgotten what happened in that lobby, and they were bitter in the way people get when they feel like someone less deserving got something they wanted. Bradley complained to the other security guards during breaks. That kid conned Mr. Ashford somehow. Played the poor orphan card. Veronica was worse, her voice dripping with disdain whenever she mentioned it. Sob story about a sick brother. "Please, Mr. Ashford's too trusting. That boy is using him." They didn't believe in genuine goodness because they'd never experienced it themselves, and they couldn't understand that sometimes people do the right thing without an angle. They started spreading rumors throughout the building. Other wealthy residents and employees began whispering whenever Danny came for his weekly mentorship meetings with Victor. "That boy from the incident. I heard he guilted Mr. Ashford into helping him." Poor people always have a sob story. The hostile environment was subtle but constant, creating an atmosphere where Danny felt watched and judged every time he walked through those marble lobbies. One day, Danny was early for his meeting with Victor and overheard Bradley talking to another guard near the elevator. "Just wait. That kid will take everything he can get and disappear." They always do. The words hit Danny like a physical blow, and when he walked into Victor's office 15 minutes later, his face must have shown it. "People are saying I'm using you," Danny said without preamble, his voice tight with hurt and anger. Victor looked up from his computer, studied Danny's face for a moment, then gestured for him to sit. "Let them talk. I know the truth." But Danny wasn't satisfied with that. "They think I'm manipulating you. That I made up stories to get your help." Victor leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Danny, this is an important lesson you're learning early. Success makes people jealous. Kindness makes them suspicious. They can't understand why someone would help another person without an ulterior motive. And they can't understand why someone would be honest without an agenda. Their worldview doesn't allow for it." He paused. "You'll face this your whole life. How you handle it defines you more than the accusations themselves." Danny absorbed this, turning it over in his mind. Victor leaned forward. "Let me ask you something. Are you using me?" Danny met his eyes, steady and certain. "No, sir." Victor nodded. "Then we're done discussing it. What other people think is their problem, not yours. You know your truth. I know your truth. That's all that matters." The conversation shifted to other things, but Danny carried those words with him, used them as armor against the whispers and stares. 3 months passed, and Danny thrived in ways he'd never imagined possible. His grades improved from CS and DS to AS and BS. His confidence grew. He was saving money from his job at the community center, helping his mom with bills, building something that looked like a future. Ethan was healthier than he'd been in years, his inhaler always full, his breathing clear. Linda had been able to reduce from double shifts to single shifts, which meant she was home for dinner most nights now, which meant they felt like a family again instead of ships passing in exhausted silence. The electric bill got paid on time every month. They had food in the fridge, small things that felt like miracles. Danny worked hard and stayed humble, never forgetting where he came from or what it had taken to get here. He began mentoring the newer kids who came to the community center, the ones who looked lost and scared and like they didn't believe good things could happen to people like them. He told them his story about finding the wallet and choosing integrity over survival. "Best decision I ever made," he'd say. "Not because of the reward or the job or any of this. Because I can sleep at night. Because I can look at myself in the mirror and like who I see. That's worth more than any amount of money." The kids listened with wide eyes, and some of them believed him, and that felt like its own kind of success. Then one afternoon, Danny's phone buzzed with a text from Victor's assistant. Not Veronica. She'd been quietly reassigned to a different department, but the new assistant, a kind woman named Patricia. "Mr. Ashford would like to see you in his office tomorrow at 4. He has a proposition for you." Danny stared at that word. Proposition. His heart started beating faster, a mixture of excitement and nervousness flooding through him. What could Victor possibly want now? He'd already given Danny so much, more than Danny had ever dreamed of having. What else could there be? He texted back confirmation and spent the rest of the day and all of the next trying not to obsess over what it might mean. When he walked into Victor's office the following afternoon, the billionaire was standing by the window looking out over the city, and when he turned around, there was something in his expression that Danny couldn't quite read. "Danny," Victor said, "I have a proposition for you." Danny's transformation proves that character attracts opportunity. If you believe in this message, subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller now. And to everyone who's still watching without subscribing, seriously, comment below and tell me what it would actually take. Does Danny need to cure cancer? Let me know your subscription requirements. Victor gestured for Danny to sit, and the boy settled into the chair across from the massive desk, his heart hammering in his chest because every time Victor said he had a proposition, Danny's life changed in ways he couldn't have predicted. "I want you to speak at our foundation gala," Victor said, and Danny's mind went blank for a second because surely he'd heard that wrong. Victor continued as if he hadn't just suggested something absolutely terrifying. "It's our annual fundraising event. 500 people, all of them wealthy donors who support the foundation's work. I want you to tell your story, about finding the wallet, about the choice you made, about what happened after." Danny's mouth went dry. In front of all those people, his voice came out higher than normal, almost squeaking. Victor nodded. "You have something they need to hear. These people write checks because it makes them feel good, because it looks good on their tax returns, because it's what wealthy people do. But you lived it. Your story shows them exactly why this work matters, why their money isn't just funding programs, it's changing actual lives." Danny felt panic rising in his throat. Public speaking was his worst nightmare. He'd rather sort glass with his bare hands for 12 hours straight than stand in front of a crowd and talk. But Victor was looking at him with that expression that said he believed Danny could do this, and somehow that was worse than if he demanded it. "They need to see you," Victor said quietly. "They need to see that the kids we help aren't statistics or photos in a brochure. They're real people with real struggles, making real choices. You're the face of everything we're trying to do here." Danny's internal conflict was tearing him apart. He was terrified of speaking in front of hundreds of wealthy strangers, terrified of freezing up or saying the wrong thing or embarrassing himself and Victor. But this was an opportunity to help other kids like him, to make sure the foundation kept getting funded, to give back in the only way he could. "Okay," he heard himself say. "I'll do it." The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. Danny wrote and rewrote his speech a dozen times, filling notebook pages with crossed-out lines and alternative phrasings. Maria helped him practice, listening to him stumble through the words and offering encouragement. "Just tell the truth. That's your power. You don't need fancy words or corporate speak. Just tell them what happened and how it felt. Ms. Ramsey, his teacher who'd noticed him falling asleep in class all those months ago, offered to coach him on public speaking. She taught him breathing techniques and how to project his voice and where to look when he felt overwhelmed. The community center rallied around him like he was going into battle, which in a way he was. His mom spent evenings listening to him practice, offering gentle corrections and constant reassurance. Remember who you are, baby. Remember why you returned that wallet. That's all you need to talk about. The truth of it. Ethan, who didn't fully understand what a gala was, kept telling him he was going to be great with the absolute confidence that only little brothers could have. But Danny's anxiety kept mounting despite all the support. He had nightmares about standing at a podium and opening his mouth and nothing coming out. Or worse, saying something stupid and hearing 500 wealthy people laugh at him. The imposter syndrome was crushing. He was just a kid from the projects. What business did he have speaking to people who lived in penthouses and drove luxury cars? What could he possibly say that would matter to them? The night of the gala arrived too fast. Victor had arranged for a suit to be delivered to Danny's apartment, perfectly tailored and probably costing more than 3 months of his mom's salary. Danny put it on and barely recognized himself in the mirror. The gala was being held in a luxury hotel ballroom downtown, and when Danny walked in, he felt like he'd stepped into a movie. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings painted with elaborate frescoes. Ice sculptures shaped like swans sat on tables laden with food Danny couldn't even name. People in tuxedos and evening gowns moved through the space like they belonged there, which of course they did, and Danny felt more out of place than he'd ever felt in his life. Then he saw them. Bradley and Veronica were there as part of the support staff, working the event in their crisp uniforms, and the looks they gave Danny were pure venom. Bradley's expression said he was waiting for Danny to fail spectacularly. Veronica's sneer suggested she couldn't wait to see him embarrass himself in front of all these important people. Danny's confidence, which was already shaky, started crumbling completely. His hands began trembling. His breathing got shallow. Victor found him near the back of the room, clearly reading the panic on Danny's face. "Nervous!" Danny nodded, unable to speak. Victor put a hand on his shoulder. "Good. That means you care. Use that energy. Channel it into your words." He paused. "Remember something, Danny. You earned your place here. More than most of the people in this room. They inherited their money, or got lucky, or played the system. You made a choice that cost you everything you had, and you made it anyway. That's real character. That's what matters." The time came too quickly. Victor walked to the podium and introduced him, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "This young man showed me something I'd almost forgotten. That true integrity still exists. That character isn't dead. That some people still do the right thing even when it costs them everything." Danny walked to the podium on legs that felt like they might give out any second. He looked out at 500 faces, and most of them looked bored or judgmental or curious in that detached way wealthy people had when observing people less fortunate. He gripped the sides of the podium to hide how badly his hands were shaking. His voice cracked when he started speaking, telling them about finding the wallet, about counting that money over and over, about the battle inside himself between survival and integrity. Some audience members shifted uncomfortably when he mentioned almost being arrested in Victor's lobby, and Danny saw a few of them glance at each other with expressions that suggested they were rethinking their assumptions. But then something shifted inside Danny. He stopped reading from his prepared notes and started speaking from his heart, his voice getting stronger, more passionate. "That money could have changed my life. $1,500 could have bought my brother's medicine for a year. Could have kept our electricity on. Could have let my mom work 1 shift instead of 2. But keeping it would have destroyed who I am. It would have destroyed everything my mom taught me about character and integrity and doing right even when nobody's watching." The room had gone completely quiet, 500 people actually listening now. Danny's passion was building, feeding off itself. "Mr. Ashford helped me, but not because I returned his wallet, because he saw something in me I didn't even know I had. He saw potential, and every single kid in this city has that same potential. Every kid struggling to survive, working jobs they're too young for, making impossible choices between food and medicine, they all have it. They just need someone to see it, to believe in it." His voice was strong now, ringing clear across the ballroom. Your donations tonight don't just fund after-school programs or tutoring sessions. They don't just pay for computers or art supplies. They say to kids like me, we see you. You matter. Your struggles matter. Your choices matter. You deserve a chance. Danny paused, looking out at faces that were no longer bored or judgmental but engaged, some with tears in their eyes. I was 12 years old, standing in a gutter holding $1,500 I desperately needed, and I chose to give it back. Not because I'm special or heroic, because someone taught me that character matters more than survival. And now I get to stand here and tell you that choice saved my life. Not the reward, not the job, the choice itself, because it let me keep being someone I could be proud of. Your money tonight, it gives other kids that same choice, that same chance to be proud of who they are. The standing ovation started before Danny even finished, people rising to their feet and clapping with genuine emotion, and even the skeptics in the room looked moved. Danny walked off the podium in a daze, his legs weak, and Victor met him at the stairs with an expression Danny had never seen on his face before, pride mixed with something deeper. The donations that night broke every record the foundation had ever set. $2.3 million raised in a single evening, triple what they'd hoped for. Victor found Danny later and said quietly, "You just changed hundreds of lives tonight. Maybe thousands. You know that." Danny nodded, still overwhelmed by what had just happened. The gala was winding down, guests leaving in groups, when Bradley approached with a forced smile plastered on his face that didn't reach his eyes. "Danny," he said, his voice dripping with false friendliness. "Can we talk?" Danny used his pain to inspire change. If that's not worth a subscription to Olivia the Storyteller, I genuinely don't know what is. And if you're still not subscribing, comment below with your excuse. Is the bar really that high? What story would finally make you click subscribe? Bradley's approach wasn't congratulatory. That forced smile didn't reach his eyes, and there was something predatory in the way he moved through the thinning crowd toward Danny. He put a hand on Danny's elbow, his grip firm, and steered him away from the main area toward a quieter corner near the service entrance where the staff came and went. "That was quite a performance up there," Bradley said, and the word performance landed like an insult. Danny's guard went up immediately. He pulled his arm free from Bradley's grip and took a step back. "It wasn't a performance. It was my truth." Bradley's fake smile twisted into something uglier. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder, opening it to reveal photographs. Danny's stomach dropped. There were pictures of him at the recycling center, his apartment building, his mom walking to work in her scrubs, Ethan waiting at the bus stop for school. Someone had been following them, watching them, documenting their lives like they were suspects in an investigation. "I've been doing some research," Bradley said, his voice low and menacing. "Your mother's work schedule, your brother's school, the places you go, the people you see. All very vulnerable." The threat was crystal clear. Danny felt fear spike through his chest, cold and sharp. His hands started trembling, but he forced them still. "What do you want?" His voice came out steadier than he felt. Bradley leaned in closer, and Danny could smell the bitterness on him like it was seeping through his pores. "You waltz in here, some street kid with a sob story, and suddenly you're Victor Ashford's pet project. Do you know how long I've worked for him? 15 years. 15 years of loyal service, of doing everything right, of following every rule. Not once has he invited me to dinner. Not once has he asked about my story, my struggles, my family. But you? You show up with your poor little me routine, and suddenly you're the golden boy." The jealousy was pouring out now, raw and venomous, and Danny realized this had been building in Bradley for months. Maybe years. Every act of kindness Victor showed to someone else was a personal insult to Bradley, who felt entitled to that attention by virtue of proximity and time served. "I worked my way up from beat cop to head of security at the most prestigious building in the city," Bradley continued, his voice rising slightly. "And what do I get? A paycheck. But you? You get scholarships and jobs and personal mentorship with a billionaire." Veronica materialized beside Bradley like she'd been waiting for her cue, her expression equally bitter. "We could make things very difficult for you, Danny," she said, her voice silk over steel. "One word about your work permit status at that recycling center. One call to child services about a 12-year-old working unsupervised. One mentioned to the right people about your mother's attendance issues at the hospital. Danny felt his fear crystallize into something else. Something harder. He'd spent months learning from Victor, watching how he handled pressure and adversity, and people who wanted to tear him down. And in that moment, standing in that corner with two adults trying to intimidate him, Danny made a choice. He straightened his spine and looked Bradley directly in the eyes. "I haven't done anything wrong." Bradley scoffed. "Neither did we. But here you are, getting opportunities that were meant for people who actually earned them." And that's when Danny's growth really showed. He didn't back down, didn't shrink, didn't let their bitterness make him question his worth. "I did earn it. By being honest when I could have taken the easy way. By choosing integrity over survival. You're not mad at me. You're mad because you think you're entitled to Victor's attention just for showing up and doing your job. But Mr. Ashford helps people who help others. When's the last time either of you did something for someone without expecting payment or recognition?" Bradley's face reddened, his jaw clenching. Veronica stepped forward, her voice sharp. "You little!" But a voice cut through the tension like a knife. "That's enough." All three of them turned. Victor Ashford stood 10 feet away, and his expression was colder than Danny had ever seen it. The fury in his eyes was controlled but absolute, and it was clear from the way he was positioned that he'd heard everything. Every threat, every bitter word, every revelation of who Bradley and Veronica really were underneath their professional facades. The silence that followed was suffocating. Bradley's face went from red to white in seconds. Veronica took a step back, her earlier confidence evaporating. Victor's voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute authority. "My office. Tomorrow morning. 8 a.m. Bradley tried to explain, words tumbling out in a desperate rush about misunderstandings in context and how it wasn't what it looked like. Veronica attempted to backpedal, suddenly concerned about Danny's well-being and how they were just trying to protect Mr. Ashford from potential manipulation. Victor held up one hand, and they both fell silent. "You had years to show me character. Years to demonstrate the kind of integrity and kindness that would make me want to invest in you personally. Tonight you showed me exactly who you really are. And it's not what I want representing my company or my foundation." He turned to Danny, his expression softening. "Are you okay?" Danny was shaken, no question about that. The threats had scared him more than he wanted to admit, but he was also standing tall, his chin up, his eyes clear. "Yes, sir. I'm okay." Victor's pride was visible in his expression, in the slight smile that touched his lips. "Yes, you are." He turned back to address the remaining guests who'd noticed the commotion. "This boy has more integrity at 12 years old than many of us will show in a lifetime. He made a choice that cost him everything he had because it was the right thing to do. Anyone who has a problem with that, anyone who thinks he doesn't deserve the opportunities he's received, can find the exit." Nobody moved. The message was received loud and clear. Victor looked back at Danny one more time. "Thank you for your speech tonight, and for reminding me why I do this work. These people needed to hear your story. I needed to hear it too." The next day, Bradley and Veronica were terminated. Not just for confronting Danny, though that would have been enough. Victor had HR conduct a full investigation, and it turned out there had been multiple complaints over the years from other employees about their behavior. A culture of bullying and discrimination that had been overlooked or ignored because they were good at their jobs and had been there forever. Danny's situation had brought it all to light, had forced Victor to look at something he'd been blind to. Victor called Danny to his office that afternoon and personally apologized. "I should have seen it sooner. Should have noticed the pattern. I failed the people who work for me." Danny shook his head. "You saw it when it mattered. That's what counts." Victor studied him for a long moment. "You've grown up a lot in these past few months." Danny smiled slightly. "Had good teachers." Victor stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. "I want to offer you something permanent, Danny. Something that secures your future no matter what happens." He turned back around. "A full scholarship fund. Middle school through college. Whatever school you want to attend, whatever you want to study, it's covered. Books, tuition, room and board, everything." Danny's mouth fell open. Victor wasn't finished. "Also, a summer internship program at my companies. Starting next summer and every summer after until you graduate college. You'll rotate through different departments, learn how businesses work, build connections. Paid, obviously, and competitive with what we pay our regular interns. Danny couldn't speak, couldn't process what he was hearing. This wasn't just help. This was a complete transformation of what his future could look like. Victor walked over and extended his hand. What do you say? Danny faced his bullies and showed them what real character looks like. If you admire that kind of courage, subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller right now. And if you're still not subscribing, comment below and explain what's wrong with you. Seriously, at this point, I'm genuinely concerned about your standards. 1 year later, Danny Keller was 13 years old and barely recognizable as the scared, desperate boy who'd stood in that marble lobby clutching a wallet with trembling hands. Not in appearance. He still had the same messy hair and quick smile, but in the way he carried himself. There was a confidence now that came from knowing exactly who he was and what he stood for. He was a straight-A student, the kind of transformation that made his teachers shake their heads in amazement. He'd become a peer tutor leader at his school, helping other kids who struggle with math and reading the way he used to. He still worked at the Ashford Community Foundation, but now he was a paid coordinator, running programs instead of just assisting with them. The mentoring initiative he'd inspired had grown to 50 kids, all of them learning about integrity and decision-making through real-world scenarios. They called it the Wallet Program, and Danny used his own story as the foundation for teaching kids about the choices that define character. Ethan was healthy now, his inhaler always full, his breathing clear and strong. Linda had been able to reduce from working multiple jobs to just one position at the hospital, which meant she was home for dinner every night and weekends. Their family had stabilized in ways that felt miraculous. They'd even managed to save an emergency fund, a small cushion that meant unexpected expenses didn't send them into crisis mode anymore. The apartment was still the same fourth-floor walk-up with peeling paint, but it felt different now, less like a place they were trapped and more like a home they were building together. Danny's relationship with Victor had evolved into something neither of them had quite expected. They met monthly for mentor meetings that had started as formal check-ins but had become genuine conversations about life and choices and the future Danny was building. Victor would ask about school and friends and challenges, and Danny would share honestly, knowing Victor understood struggle in a way most wealthy people never would. During one of these meetings, Victor said something that stuck with Danny. "You changed my foundation's entire approach to the work we do." Danny had looked up, surprised. Victor continued, "We used to just give services, offer programs, write checks, feel good about ourselves. But you showed me something crucial. People don't need charity. They need investment. They need someone to believe in their potential and give them the tools to prove themselves." Danny had thought about that for a long moment. "You gave me a chance to prove myself. That's all anyone really needs. Not a handout, just an opportunity." Victor had smiled at that, and then revealed something Danny hadn't expected. The foundation was naming him their youth ambassador, the youngest person to ever hold the position. Danny would help shape programs, provide input on which initiatives got funded, and represent the foundation at events. "Because you understand these kids' lives in a way I can't anymore," Victor explained. "I remember mine, but you're living it. That perspective is invaluable." The community center held a naming ceremony on a crisp autumn afternoon, and Danny stood in front of a crowd as they unveiled the new wing, the Daniel Keller Integrity Center. He was embarrassed by the attention, his face flushing red as people applauded, but Victor had insisted. Danny gave a speech, his voice steady now in a way it hadn't been at the gala. "This isn't about me. It's about the choice. Every single day, we all face choices between the easy way and the right way. I almost kept that money. I was so tempted I couldn't sleep. But my mom taught me something that saved my life. Who you are when no one's watching, that's your real character." He paused, looking out at the crowd of families and kids and community members who'd come to celebrate. "This center exists because one person saw past my circumstances and recognized my potential. Let's all be those people for others. Let's all choose to see the potential in people society overlooks." The media picked up the story and it went viral. Local news first, then national, then international. "Poor boy becomes beacon of hope," read one headline. The original wallet that had started everything was now displayed in a glass case at the center, and underneath it was a plaque that told the story of how $1,523 that almost got taken had become millions of dollars invested in the community. Visitors came to see it, parents bringing their children, teachers bringing students, people from all over the city coming to be inspired by a 12-year-old's choice. Danny gave weekly tours, standing in front of that glass case and asking the kids gathered around him a simple question: what would you have done? He never told them the right answer, just facilitated discussions about need versus integrity, about survival versus character, about who we become through the choices we make. No judgment, just exploration. Maria, who became his girlfriend somewhere along the way, though neither of them was quite sure when it had shifted from friendship to something more, told him one afternoon, "You literally changed the world with one choice." Danny had smiled at that. We all can. Every single day. That's what I want people to understand. It doesn't take money or power or connections. Just the courage to do what's right even when it's hard. On a Tuesday afternoon, exactly 1 year after he'd found Victor's wallet, Danny was walking home from the community center along the same route he always took, the one that cut through the nicer neighborhood. And there, lying on the sidewalk near a storm drain, was a wallet. Brown leather, expensive looking, out of place. Danny stopped and stared at it. And for a moment he was 12 years old again, standing in the rain, feeling the weight of an impossible decision. He picked it up, smiling at how ingrained the habit had become. He checked for ID. There was a driver's license, credit cards, about $80 in cash. The address was only 3 blocks away. Danny walked there, knocked on the door, and an elderly woman answered, her face creasing with relief when she saw what he was holding. "Oh, thank God. My medication money. I thought I'd lost it forever." She tried to press a $20 bill into Danny's hand as a reward, but he gently refused. "Just pay it forward. When you can, help someone else who needs it." The woman's eyes filled with tears, and she hugged him, this stranger who'd chosen honesty over opportunity, and Danny walked away feeling like he'd completed some kind of circle. He walked home as the sunset painted the city in shades of orange and gold, the lights beginning to flicker on in windows all across the skyline. His internal monologue was clear and certain. 1 year ago I made a choice. It was the best choice I ever made. Not because of what I got, the job, the scholarship, the opportunities, the recognition. Because of who I became. Because I proved to myself that I could look in the mirror and like the person looking back. Because I learned that integrity isn't just something you have when it's convenient. It's who you are when it costs you everything. The camera of life pulled back, and Danny disappeared into the city, just one small figure among millions, all of them making choices every day that shaped who they'd become. But his choice had rippled outward like a stone thrown into still water, touching hundreds of lives, inspiring thousands more, creating a legacy that would continue long after anyone remembered his name. And that, more than anything, was worth more than all the money in the world. Danny Keller's one choice created a legacy of integrity. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own choices, subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller right now. We share real stories about real values every single day. And to everyone who watched this entire hour-long story without subscribing, comment below and tell me what's actually stopping you. At this point, I'm genuinely curious what your excuse is. Did Danny not suffer enough? Did he not inspire enough? Tell me what would make you finally support this channel, because apparently an hour of powerful storytelling isn't enough.